The camera shakes as a tank burns in the middle of a ruined street, smoke curling into the gray sky, a sound somewhere between thunder and heartbreak. That's not a World War II relic. It's an American Abrams, the pride of modern armor, and it's just been taken out by something worth less than a used motorcycle. One shot, one cheap Soviet-era tube. Game over. For decades, tank crews have believed in layers of steel, sensors, and million-dollar armor. But somehow, this 60-year-old relic keeps proving that the future of armored warfare might be the past. How can something designed with a slide rule and a wrench still tear through digital-age machines built by supercomputers? The RPG-7, 3 letters and a number that have ruined more tanks than most wars. It first rolled out in 1961, a time when the Beatles hadn't even released their first single. Yet today, soldiers in every conflict from the Middle East to Eastern Europe still whisper its name with a mix of respect and fear. It's ugly, loud, brutally simple, and terrifyingly effective. There's no guidance system, no targeting AI, no fancy radar. You point, you fire, and you pray the backblast doesn't roast your buddy behind you. And still, it works, over and over again. Maybe the real dark reason isn't just about explosives and shaped charges. Maybe it's the uncomfortable truth that after all our technological evolution, war still rewards what's cheap, reliable, and merciless. So when a tank commander sees that familiar puff of smoke from an alleyway, he's not thinking about history or innovation. He's thinking, oh no, not again. It all began long before the Cold War, back in the 1930s, when Soviet engineers were experimenting with a strange metal tube called the RS-65. It was supposed to stop tanks, but without the shaped charge technology, it was basically just a very angry firework. Impressive to watch, useless in combat. The idea was right, the timing was wrong. Then came World War II, and with it, the race to turn desperation into invention. Across the ocean, American soldiers carried something new, a skinny, awkward-looking launcher that spat rockets like a dragon with asthma. They called it the bazooka. Simple, portable, and loud enough to make a panzer crew's blood run cold. For the first time, a man on foot could kill a tank worth thousands of dollars. That changed everything. Of course, the Germans, being, well, Germans, saw the bazooka and thought, nice toy, let's make a bigger one. They grabbed a few captured launchers, reversed engineered them, and rolled out the Panzer Schreck, literally tank terror. It was heavier, meaner, and could punch through ridiculous amounts of armor. But it also came with one tiny problem. The backblast could fry your eyebrows off. Soldiers soon learned to wear face shields, not for style, but survival. That wasn't enough. The Wehrmacht wanted something even simpler. Enter the Panzerfaust, a one-shot disposable launcher that anyone could use. Farmer, factory worker, even a terrified teenager drafted in 1945. You pointed it, fired it, and probably ran for your life. It was crude, but it worked. When the war finally ended, the Soviets looked at what everyone had built. The American bazooka, the German Panzerfaust, the Panzerschreck, and thought, we can do this, but smarter. They didn't just copy, they blended. From the Americans, they took the rocket idea. From the Germans, the simplicity and portability. And from their own mistakes, they learned patience. That cocktail of ideas would soon explode, literally, into the RPG line, a weapon that would outlive empires, rewrite battlefield tactics, and haunt tank designers for generations. Because sometimes progress doesn't come from perfection. It comes from everyone's mistakes stitched together, with a really big explosion at the end. The camera jolts forward as if riding the shoulder of history itself, and you can almost see the blueprint pages fluttering in the wind. The first attempts at a shoulder-fired anti-tank weapon looked, frankly, like inventions made by people who'd had one too many late nights in the workshop. The RPG-1 was that awkward teenager of weapon design, promising on paper, brittle in reality. It could be fired, sure, but the range was tiny and the flight was wobblier than a drunk on leave. Useful? Not really. Survivable? Barely. But failure has a way of being a very good teacher. Engineers went back to the drawing board and gave it another go. Out of that persistence came the RPG-2 in 1954, and this one was no laughing matter. It could reach out to about 200 meters and punch through roughly 225 millimeters of steel. Suddenly, the foot soldier had a plausible way to threaten armored vehicles, not by miracle, but by brute engineering. When it popped up in Vietnam, American crews learned an expensive lesson. Cheap, reliable, and used cleverly, a shoulder-fired rocket could ruin your day. Then there were the prototypes that dared more and failed in new ways. The RPG-4 showed engineers which paths led to dead ends, and which roads might actually take them somewhere useful. It did some of the heavy lifting on warhead design, pointing out how shaping the charge could change the game. It didn't go mass-produced, but it taught lessons that would not be forgotten. By the time the RPG-7 appeared in 1961, you'd stopped calling these things experiments and started calling them an institution. The design was stubbornly practical, rugged, reusable, and gloriously simple. It didn't rely on fragile electronics or a pilot's patience. You could fix one with a wrench, a prayer, and a surprising amount of duct tape. Not that anyone was recommending duct tape in field manuals. Its name in Russian, roughly handheld anti-tank grenade launcher, sounds less dramatic than the chaos it can cause, but it tells you everything. It was meant to be cheap, portable, and deadly. What made the RPG-7 endure wasn't genius so much as iterative stubbornness. One flawed prototype, 24 small improvements, and an attitude of, if it breaks, make another. The result was a weapon born from trial, error, and the discipline to keep trying until you get something that works, and then make it so simple anyone can use it under stress. That, it turns out, is dangerous in a very efficient sort of way. The camera rides low, close to the launcher, as if it's a companion on a dusty patrol. Up close, the thing looks almost laughably simple. A bare metal tube, 2 handles, a trigger that feels like something from a junked tractor, and an optic that clicks into place like a stubborn old friend. There are no delicate internals hiding behind panels, no glowing screens to distract you. It's honest in the way a blade is honest. You know exactly what it will do when you pull it. You load from the front. The round sits half in and half out of the mouth, like a stubborn egg that refuses to hide. The first little boom is not the main event. It's a shove, an embarrassed cough that pushes the grenade clear of the tube for roughly 11 meters. That gives the shooter space from their own backblast, because when the next stage wakes up, the real rocket motor kicks in, and the stabilizing fins unfold like tiny metal petals. The projectile settles into flight, and the rest is mostly physics and bad luck for whatever's downrange. That backblast is part of the weapon's personality. You need about 2 meters of empty air behind the operator, or you risk turning a friendly into an unwilling barbecue. It's the kind of detail that makes teamwork mandatory. One man shoulders and aims, the other carries extra rounds, watches the rear, and curses if someone stands too close. Not glamorous, not sexy, but brutally effective. The sighting system on later models is almost comical in its modesty compared to the high-tech targeting suites on modern tanks. A simple optical reticle, some even come with battery-powered low-light aids, enough to work at dusk or under a blackout, not enough to make the operator smug. You don't need a satellite or a wall of processors to get a decent hit at the right range. You need practice, nerve, and the right angle. Maintenance is straightforward because there is almost nothing to maintain. A quick wipe, a check of the cocking lever, and you're back in business. Replaceable parts are cheap and widely available. The launcher doesn't sulk if you leave it in the rain for a week. You can teach someone to use it in an afternoon, and they'll remember how the rest of their life got rearranged if they ever aim it at a tank. Compared to an anti-tank guided missile, with its guidance electronics, seeker heads, and multi-million-dollar price tag, the RPG-7 is almost proud in its thrift. ATGMs need logistics, trained crews, and nerves of glass. The RPG needs a shoulder, breath control, and a friend watching your back. It's a toolbox weapon for messy war, not a Swiss watch for parade ground perfection. You watch a warhead strike, and for a moment, it looks like someone scraped the sky with a very angry spoon. Inside that cone is the secret. When the explosive goes off, it doesn't just explode outward like a firework. It collapses a metal-lined cavity into a needle of molten metal that behaves less like shrapnel and more like a tiny, extremely focused hammer. That is the Monroe effect, and it is the rude little trick that lets a small warhead tell a multi-ton tank to step aside. It's not mystical, it's brutally scientific. The jet punches through armor, spits molten metal into the crew compartment, and suddenly, something that weighed 30 tons is mostly very expensive scrap. Not every warhead is tuned to punch armor. There are fragmentation rounds that are basically small airborne trash storms. They don't care about armor so much as people, wire, and light cover. Fired into an open position, they scatter bits of metal and give anyone inside a very bad day. Then there are thermobaric types, which are the cinematic cousins of explosives. They spray a fuel mist and then light it off, creating a pressure and heat wave that behaves like a hungry room, sucking oxygen, increasing pressure, and leaving enclosed spaces eerily hostile to life. In urban fighting, that can turn a fortified building into something close to an oven with bad intentions. The cruel efficiency of these effects is what earned the weapon its fearsome reputation. An armor-piercing hit can cause secondary explosions, ignite ammunition, or wreck engines, and sometimes you don't even have to destroy the hull to remove a tank from the fight. Disable the turret, fry the drivetrain, or blind the optics, and the tank becomes a hulking paperweight. That's the math of asymmetry. A cheap round, aimed well, can cause cascading failure in systems that cost millions. But the system is not without poetic irony. The same mechanisms that make it effective also make it dangerous to the user. Misfires, early detonations, and faulty safeties have maimed and killed operators. A live warhead with a stubborn safety pin or a dud fuse will behave unpredictably. And trusted supply lines mean nothing when corrosion or rough handling turns a weapon into a gamble. There's a dark humor in that a tool designed to give the underdog power can bite back, sometimes fatally, because of dirt, neglect, or haste. You finish watching and the image lingers, a clean geometry of destruction, terrifying in its simplicity. It's not gruesome spectacle, it's efficient, mechanical, and merciless. That, more than anything, is the dark reason the world still takes this old tube very seriously. The sound of the jungle in Vietnam was never quiet, not really. You'd hear the bugs, the wind, maybe a distant helicopter, and then, out of nowhere, that hiss. A flash, a roar, and suddenly an American M113 was a burning coffin in the green. The RPG-2 and later the RPG-7 turned ambush into an art form. Not Vietnamese soldiers could vanish into the trees, fire once, and melt back into the undergrowth before anyone could even yell, "Contact!" The weapon didn't need precision, it needed opportunity. And the jungle, thick and unforgiving, provided plenty. Even the mighty M48 Patton tank, that iron promise of Western firepower, found itself humbled by a weapon that cost less than its radio. A decade later, and a continent away, the deserts of the Middle East echoed with the same hollow thump. In the hands of both Arab and Israeli troops, the RPG-7 became the great equalizer. It didn't care which flag you fought under, it just did its job. Convoys burned in Sinai, tanks smoldered in Lebanon, and generals on both sides began muttering the same nervous word, RPG. Soldiers loved it, commanders feared it, and engineers stayed up late inventing new armor to survive it. Then came Chechnya, a cruel city war where every window was a potential firing point. Russian T-72s rolled into Grozny like armored giants, and within hours they were being picked apart from all directions. RPG teams fired from basements, rooftops, and apartment windows, raining rockets down on tank columns that had nowhere to go. Some crews never even saw their attackers, just explosions chewing through the city, one floor at a time. The Russians lost more tanks in days than they'd planned to in months. Urban combat had found its natural predator. In Iraq, the story repeated itself, but with a modern twist. The American Abrams, that invincible symbol of 21st century warfare, got a rude awakening. In one infamous fight, an Abrams took 14 RPG hits. 14! The armor held, technically, but the engine was wrecked, optics shattered, and the tank was as useful as a parked bus. Crews learned fast. You could survive an RPG hit and still lose the battle. The math hadn't changed. Cheap, simple, and everywhere always beats perfect, expensive, and rare. And now in Ukraine, the RPG has entered its strangest chapter yet. The same warhead once fired from a shoulder is now hanging under buzzing drones, dropped from the sky like steel fruit. Tanks hide under metal cages that look more like barbecue grills than battlefield tech, trying to ward off attacks from above. Soldiers call them turtle tanks. The name's cute, the results aren't. Each generation tries to outsmart the rocket. Reactive armor, slat screens, even active protection systems, and yet somehow the old Soviet tube keeps finding new ways to ruin very modern machinery. It's the same old story retold across decades, the cheap, stubborn survivor that refuses to retire. The RPG isn't just a weapon anymore, it's a recurring nightmare that learned to adapt. You'd think, after 6 decades of getting blown up by the same weapon, someone would have solved the problem. And yet, here we are. Modern tanks roll out with names that sound like superheroes. Trophy, Iron Fist, Arena, all these active protection systems that promise invincibility. They can see incoming threats, intercept rockets in midair, and even brag about artificial intelligence. But against the humble RPG, they still flinch. One rocket gets through, or 2, or 10 fired from different angles, and suddenly that million-dollar miracle is smoking quietly by the roadside, wondering what went wrong. That's the tragic comedy of modern warfare. The smartest machines in history still lose to a 60-year-old tube made of steel and luck. The soldiers know it too. You can see it in the desperate armor they bolt on, the turtle tanks covered in cages and scrap metal, hoping to trick physics into mercy. But the RPG doesn't care about hope, or price tags, or pride. It's a weapon that has outlived empires, seen every generation of armor come and go, and still refuses to retire. Maybe the real lesson isn't about technology at all. Maybe it's about humility. That no matter how advanced we get, war will always reward what's simple, cheap, and merciless. If this is the future of tanks, are they already obsolete?